Hey everyone, welcome to our new home. I'm Vladimir Dutit. We are watching all the stories coming into the CBS News Broadcast Center from our partners here in the United States and around the world. If it is happening, we're going to take you there live. This is CBS News 24/7. This hour, we are keeping a close eye on the Supreme Court. We are expecting decisions at any moment that could have wide-reaching implications for Americans. Homes washed away, dams at the brink of failure. Look at these images, and more wet weather is on the way for the middle of the country. We are live in Minnesota. And a jury is deliberating right this moment in the Karen Read murder trial. As soon as there is a verdict, we will bring it to you live. But we want to start with the nation's highest court in the land, where in the next few minutes, we will have a decision and a couple of decisions on the remaining cases for the year. Still on the docket, cases involving abortion, presidential immunity, and January 6th. CBS News campaign reporter Katrina Kaufman is standing outside the Supreme Court. Remind us, Katrina, as you are out there in front of the Supreme Court, the nation's highest court in the land, what we're waiting on today. What are those cases that will have far-reaching implications for Americans across the country?
Good morning. I don't know if you can hear, but there's already a group of protesters waiting for these decisions to come down any moment. The Supreme Court still has about a dozen cases to make decisions on, and we're going to have more opinions today, tomorrow, and on Friday. And a few of the big ones that we're looking out for, as you mentioned, are two that implicate former President Donald Trump's criminal trials, and then another related to abortion. One of them is Fisher, and this is actually a case about the January 6th rioters. It was brought by a Pennsylvania police officer, Fisher, who says that the obstruction of official proceeding charge that was used in his case doesn't actually apply to him. He says that it only applies to obstructing with documents or records related to an official proceeding, not this act of storming the Capitol. And this could have really wide-ranging implications because there are hundreds of January 6th defendants who could be affected by this ruling, about 350 of them. And in addition, in President Trump's D.C. election interference case, there are two charges that are also related to obstruction that could be affected by the way the Supreme Court makes this decision. They could be taken out completely, or depending on the ruling, Jack Smith, special counsel, could potentially move forward with them, maybe in a narrower way. And then, of course, the really big decision everyone has been waiting for is whether or not a president is immune from criminal prosecution. This is a ruling that will impact the D.C. election interference case, which is currently on hold while we wait to see what the Supreme Court has to say on this. And it also has wide-ranging implications for the presidency and democracy itself. And then lastly, related to abortion, we have already had one abortion-related ruling. Mifepristone is being allowed to remain on the market. But in Idaho, where there's a near total ban on abortion, there's a lawsuit that's related to a conflict between state and federal law. Because under a federal law known as EMTALA, emergency services are supposed to be able to perform abortions if a woman's health is at risk. But in Idaho, they have different provisions there under this near total ban on abortion. So the way this case is decided could affect the health of pregnant women, could affect the way hospitals are running their emergency rooms, and could apply to about a dozen states that have similar abortion laws to Idaho.
All right, Katrina Kaufman for us at the Supreme Court of the United States. Those two really, really big cases that people are holding their breath for. Katrina, you mentioned them, that Idaho case with regards to the Dobbs decision, and of course, the January 6th presidential immunity case. We'll see if the SCOTUS has a ruling on those today. We'll check back in with you a little later throughout the course of the hour. Thanks, Katrina.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got some breaking news right now in Melbourne, Florida, where police there are reporting an active shooter situation. They are warning residents to stay away from the area between Babcock Street and Strawbridge Avenue. Babcock Street, Strawbridge Avenue. We're going to continue to monitor for for updates throughout the hour. We don't have a lot of information yet. In these active shooter situations, it's always difficult to get preliminary information. All we have so far is this tweet that we're putting up on the screen right now, where the police in Melbourne are warning people to avoid the area, that they're actively working this active shooter situation. That's all the information we have. But of course, our teams around the state of Florida are digging into this story. Once we get some live pictures, if we get live pictures, we'll bring it to you live right here at CBS News 24/7. Okay, we have been making this one of the lead stories all throughout the course of the week. The severe weather in the Midwest. Now there's a huge cleanup effort underway after days of flooding across hundreds of miles. Jonah Kaplan of CBS Minnesota is in North Sioux City, South Dakota, where overflowing rivers caused a rail bridge to collapse. Jonah, we've been talking to you all week long. What more can you tell us about the devastation that we just see right behind you?
Yeah, Vlad, it's remarkable. You know, I was on the ground for the Joplin tornado. I've been on the Atlantic coast for Hurricanes Matthew, Isaias, for Florence. And, you know, these kind of images, these scenes remind me of that. But it wasn't that. It wasn't a hurricane. It wasn't a tornado. This was a flood. This was 18 inches of rain in a very short time, a deluge that basically dumped sometimes an inch of rain every 15 minutes. And let me just get out of the way so you can see some of this. First of all, look at these cars that are basically hanging by a thread right over where this house just basically fell into a sinkhole. And this is a neighborhood along a place called McCook Lake. And we're told by the sheriff there are about 50 to 60 homes that have been damaged. Some of them swept into the lake. In fact, when we wanted to go out with the game warden yesterday, we wanted to actually get a look maybe from the water. And he said, no boats are going in right now because it's too dangerous to know what's in the water because of all the debris that was taken by the floods. And this isn't even by a river, by the way. It was just stormwater runoff from all of the fields right here into this neighborhood.
You know, Jonah, one of the things that I was struck by is, in this case, first of all, the devastation that we see behind you looks to me more like a hurricane, but this is in fact flooding. The other thing that struck me is there are some people who are watching in real time their homes collapsing, being swept away by these floodwaters.
Yeah, the sheriff said that crews had to basically race to save about 36 people out of these homes while there was still water on the street. And it's a good thing they did race because a couple, feet from here, and we'll show you the video a little later. I mean, the water carved the neighborhood into canyons. I mean, giant holes right in the middle of the street. And the situation's so tenuous right now. We're just on the edge of it all, but you have to go down further. And the sheriff says that rescue and restoration crews, it might take weeks before they can even safely get a truck here to begin the hard work. So when we talk about a natural disaster, it is so much more than just the immediate days. This is something that these families are going to be living with, this irrevocable damage on their own sense of security forever.
Heart just goes out to them. Jonah, thanks so much for your reporting, man. Take care. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Grant.
Vlad, a lot of talk about how the damage across the upper Midwest and northern tier states is very similar or akin to hurricane damage, storm surge damage, for example. The water just rushes and there's nowhere to go and there's a lot of damage. And so, that's something that they're going to continue to deal with. Severe weather continues across portions of the Central Plains today, going back into portions of Arkansas, Oklahoma. All of that storm activity is pushing to the south. Meanwhile, more storms are going to develop over portions of the Northeast later today. A lot of ongoing severe weather across the nation already this morning. But look up to the north and west. Places that have been dealing with the flooding have seen severe weather. We've got several reports of downed trees, some tornado reports, and then, of course, the heavy rainfall resulting in some additional freshwater flooding. There have been severe thunderstorms ongoing pretty much all night long into the early morning hours. You see ongoing severe thunderstorm warnings for portions of eastern Oklahoma, now moving into Arkansas this morning. All of that will continue to advance to the south and east. There is a severe thunderstorm watch in effect until 11 o'clock Central. Now, most of these storms are producing straight line winds, though there is a small threat for some hail and some isolated tornadoes. But the straight line winds or just straight wind damage is going to be the primary concern, not just for that portion of the country. You've got some across the high plains up towards into eastern Colorado and then also into the northeast. Those storms in the northeast will develop later this afternoon and then advance into the Philadelphia and New York area later this evening into the overnight. Let me show you the forecast model here for where these storms are going to track as we go throughout the day. First, it's going to be that cluster of storms that travel south into Mississippi, some ongoing showers and thunderstorms across the Gulf states. But watch as this system moves to the north and east. We see more of those developing showers and thunderstorms, some of which could be severe as we make our way into 8, 9, 10, and then 11 o'clock this evening. This is going into the overnight. We'll have to watch for that threat for some severe thunderstorms moving across the Philadelphia area. Watching New York City as well later on tonight. It's tough when it's during the day, but it's even harder to get alerted by severe weather as you go into the overnight when a lot of people are going to sleep. We'll track this for you, but this is the main concern for now. But ongoing heat, guys, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Back to you, Vlad.
Oh, boy, no end in sight. Grant, thank you, friend. Appreciate it. All right, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is in Arizona today. He is there for a tour of border facilities, and he is meeting with officials. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez is following the secretary's trip. Camilo, you're there on the ground. What is the secretary hoping to get out of this visit?
Good morning, Vlad. Secretary Mayorkas is likely to tout the dramatic drop in illegal crossings here along the U.S.-Mexico border. Just to put it in perspective, back in December, during a breaking surge at the border, there were an average of 8,000 daily illegal border crossings, Vlad. That number dropped to 3,800 in May, and now that number has fallen below 2,400 in recent days here at the border. So there has been a marked and steady reduction in illegal immigration here at the border, and Mayorkas and other U.S. officials are crediting that drop with the significant action that President Biden issued here along the border over 3 weeks ago. And that action was, again, that partial ban on asylum claims that he enacted based on his executive authority. That action right now, Vlad, is rendering most migrants here ineligible for asylum, and it is allowing U.S. officials here to more quickly deport them to Mexico or to their home countries without any asylum processing. U.S. officials tell me that that has been a game changer. It is important to note, Vlad, that there are other factors at play here, too. The Mexican government has staged an aggressive crackdown against U.S.-bound migrants, stopping many of them from boarding buses and trains that would take them further north to the U.S. And also, the temperatures here have been increasing rapidly, and it's really dangerous right now, potentially deadly, to cross the border in the sweltering heat, and it's going to continue to increase that temperature as we get into the hot summer months, Vlad.
All right, Camilo, you're on the ground there with the secretary. People should know that you're one of the most well-sourced reporters covering immigration in news today. We thank you for your reporting. Hope you get a question to the secretary if he takes some. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Vlad.
Okay, folks, we are keeping an eye on the Supreme Court. There is a ruling that just came down. It came down on that social media case. Let's break it down with defense attorney and former federal prosecutor Scott Frederickson. He's joining me now to help explain exactly what the SCOTUS has ruled on. So, Scott, what can you tell us? First of all, to just up to date, to bring our audience up to date, what was this case about, and how did the justices rule?
Well, good morning, Vlad. This is a case that was brought by some social media users and states to try and prevent the Biden administration from reaching out to social media platforms to urge them to remove misinformation, information that they deemed could be dangerous, medical misinformation, say with having to do with COVID and vaccines, or election misinformation, or misinformation developed from deep fakes, Russian, Chinese, et cetera, like that. The lower courts had sided with those challenging it, asking that the states prohibit, asking the court prohibit the government, the federal government, from reaching out to these social media platforms. It was a 6-3 decision. Supreme Court sided with the Biden administration, saying it can reach out to try and urge social media platforms to remove misinformation. So this is a critical decision. There's one more important First Amendment decision still pending this bodes well for the administration on that one as well. But important for the intersection of misinformation, First Amendment rights, and the internet.
Yeah, so Scott, what were they arguing against the Biden administration? Were they just simply saying they didn't believe that the federal government had any right to interfere with the business activities of a social media company and that it came down to the First Amendment? Because anybody watching this is going to say, look, I want to combat misinformation. I don't want my children, I don't want people in my family being exposed to misinformation.
Well, that's exactly right. So those individuals in the states challenging the Biden administration were saying that we don't want the administration to have the power to even reach out to social media platforms and say, look, this is dangerous misinformation directed, say, at teens or directed at voters or directed at people who might be considering, medical treatments. They wanted the Biden administration and future administrations to have no power whatsoever to reach out to social media platforms. Supreme Court 6-3 decision, interestingly led by Amy Coney Barrett, said no, the administration does have power to reach out and attempt to ask the media platforms, if you will, to remove disinformation.
All right, Scott Frederickson breaking down the decision in Murphy versus Missouri. Seems like it's the only one we're getting today. We'll be on SCOTUS Watch again tomorrow, Scott, and I'm sure you'll be with us. We appreciate you.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Vlad.
All right. We have a lot more that we're watching. Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich is behind a glass cage this morning. Folks, this is just horrible. He doesn't look good. He is in that cage for the start of his espionage trial in Russia. We're going to take a look at what his case is all about. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich appeared in a Russian courtroom today for the start of his trial on espionage charges. He faces up to 20 years in prison if convicted. CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano is following this story for us from London. Lilia, just remind our viewers, this is such a horrible thing. Human Rights Watch, all groups are talking about this, including the Wall Street Journal, this sham trial in the case of Evan Gershkovich. But explain to our audience the claims against him. What are the Russians saying and what happened in court today?
That's a good question, Vlad, especially the part about what happened in court today, because we cannot know. This is a trial that is happening behind closed doors in complete secrecy because it is a trial involving these accusations of spying. He was basically accused of spying on a weapons manufacturer that makes tanks that are used in the war in Ukraine. Of course, the Wall Street Journal, Evan Gershkovich, his representatives, and the United States government have all said that this is not true. He's accused of seeking out this information that is classified to provide it to the CIA. Everybody has denied this. The editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal yesterday wrote an open letter talking about basically the hopelessness of this trial. She calls it a bogus trial. She says it is unfair to even call it a trial because of the bogus claims. The Wall Street Journal sustains that he was on assignment, that he had, which he did, a visa or a permit from the ministry, from the foreign ministry there in Russia to conduct his journalism. He was one of very few journalists who were left in Russia who dared to continue covering the war and continue covering Russia, given that there were so many restraints. He is the first U.S. journalist to be imprisoned under these spy charges in Russia since the Cold War. So you can imagine this is a story that the world is following as information continues to be kept from the public. His representatives, his lawyers, cannot even disclose any evidence that might be presented at trial. But the U.S. Embassy in Russia has said that Russia has failed to provide any evidence at all. It would actually be illegal for anyone to disclose it, and journalists are kept from the courtroom, Vlad.
I know it's something that President Biden has pressed on frequently, what his administration is doing to bring Evan home. Here's hoping that he gets home very, very soon. Lilia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, closer to home, folks, a big upset in the most expensive congressional primary in American history. I'm talking about right here in New York. New York's Democratic primary incumbent progressive Congressman Jamal Bowman lost to Westchester County Executive George Latimer. CBS News New York reporter Christina Fan reports.
Good morning, Vlad. This outcome was expected to some degree. George Latimer had been leading in the polls for several weeks, and last night he declared victory about 30 minutes after polls closed. He took in about 58% of the vote compared to Jamal Bowman's 42% and what became the most expensive House primary in U.S. history. Representative Bowman was a member of the Democrats' left wing whose criticism of Israel energized the Jewish community to donate and vote. About $25 million poured into this race for the 16th congressional district, the majority coming from the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, who backed Latimer, seen as the more moderate candidate. Many voters on primary day told us the torrent of negative ads against Bowman did affect their decision. Others felt that Latimer, who is currently the Westchester County executive, was more present, attending every gala and meet and greet in the county the last several decades compared to his opponent. The congressman conceded defeat Tuesday, but did not back down from his campaign message, criticizing pro-Israel groups who backed his opponent with historic levels of spending. Latimer, meanwhile, talked about the need to heal the wounds of division in the district and the nation. Given the district's overwhelming Democratic makeup, Latimer is expected to easily win the general election in November. Vlad, back to you.
$25 million spent. Christina, thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, we are just days away from the first presidential debate. In fact, we're just a day away from that first presidential debate between President Biden and former President Donald Trump. The party's presumptive nominees will go head-to-head in Atlanta in the earliest presidential debate ever. It's set to be a 90-minute debate with no audience and muted mics when the other is speaking. Our coverage on CBS News 24/7 will begin at 5 p.m. Eastern on America Decides, and the debate begins at 9 p.m. Eastern. All right, new pictures of the scene FBI agents found during their 2022 search of Mar-a-Lago. We'll bring you those next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Julian Assange is back in Australia this morning as a free man for the first time in 14 years. The WikiLeaks founder pleaded guilty today to violating the U.S. Espionage Act after reaching a plea deal with the Justice Department. A man who shot and killed 5 people and critically injured a 13-year-old girl took his own life. That's according to authorities. There was a major manhunt after the shootings at several different apartments on Monday night. As of right now, though, there is no clear motive for the killings. Prosecutors released never-before-seen photos of some of the material seized by FBI agents during their 2022 search of Mar-a-Lago. Former President Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty to charges of mishandling classified documents. His lawyers to bar prosecutors from using the material as evidence. Okay, folks, back to our top story. We are watching the Supreme Court. We've been doing that for the last couple of weeks. They've just issued a major ruling on a major social media cases. But first, several rulings on controversial cases could be coming later this week. Still on the docket, cases involving abortion access, Donald Trump's presidential immunity claim, and of course, January 6th. CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford is joining us now. So Jan, let's break down that decision first.
Well, unfortunately, it's not quite a major decision, Vlad, because the court decided that the people who were challenging this didn't have any business being in court in the first place, and they didn't even reach the merits of it. It's a really interesting case, though. A group of a couple doctors and some other individuals in 2 states sued the Biden administration, basically saying that Facebook and YouTube and Twitter had censored their speech during COVID, so they couldn't talk about the Great Barrington Declaration, if you remember that document advocating a different approach on COVID, or vaccine reluctance, or election issues. Facebook, Twitter, they took all that stuff down. And so these people and these 2 states sued, saying that even though the platforms, the social media platforms, took all their speech down, it was government officials who were pulling the strings, and that violates the First Amendment. Obviously, a really interesting case because I think, as you pointed out earlier, there's a big concern about misinformation on social media, but there's also a concern about censorship and the government having too much of a role in silencing speech, and how do you draw those lines? And that's a really difficult question. Unfortunately, today, though, the court said these people did not have what's called legal standing to file suit because they couldn't show that there was going to be some kind of specific injury going forward, that that quote, censorship, as they put it, would continue in the future. I mean, it's a very high bar. You can't just go into court, as we've discussed before, and say, I don't like what happened to me and I want them to stop doing in the future. You've got to show that that is actually what's going to happen. So the justices today in this 6-3 ruling written by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who is emerging as, I think, one of the most interesting people to watch on the court, said, not today.
Not today. All right, Jan, but tomorrow we'll be watching once again until the end of the Supreme Court's term. Thank you, Jan, as always. Appreciate you. All right, let's bring in CBS News campaign reporter and attorney Katrina Kaufman. She's standing right outside of the Supreme Court. So, Katrina, we just heard about the decision that the justices made today on that social media ruling. What are some of the other cases we're waiting for this week?
So the biggest ruling that everyone is watching out for is the Supreme Court's decision on whether a president is immune from criminal prosecution. And they've really taken their time with this case. It was something that they were first asked to take up back in December. So it's been about 6 months since they were first asked to weigh in on this issue, but they ended up allowing it to go through the district court first, and now they are finally going to make a decision on it. We're probably expecting it to come at the end of the term, but you never know with this court. The other decision we're waiting for that could implicate former President Donald Trump's cases is one related to the obstruction of an official proceeding. And specifically, this was brought by Fisher, who was one of the January 6th Capitol rioters. And he says that the obstruction of an official proceeding statute that was used in his case doesn't apply to him because it specifically mentions documents and records, which is quite different from the storming of the Capitol. And if the Supreme Court sides with him, it could implicate charges for hundreds of defendants that were part of the January 6th Capitol riot, about 350 people, as well as 2 of the charges that are part of the D.C. election interference case against former President Donald Trump. And then the other case we're really looking out for is one on abortion. And this is from Idaho, where there's a near total ban on abortion. And there's a conflict between that ban and a federal law that requires emergency care for women whose health is in danger. Now, that conflict is now forcing the Supreme Court to weigh this federal versus state issue, and also has really wide-ranging implications for abortion rights, which a lot of people care about. It is going to be a key issue on this year's ballot in the election as well.
All right, Katrina Kaufman, breaking it down for us. Katrina, we appreciate you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, let us turn now back to that massive cleanup underway in the Midwest. After days of severe flooding across multiple states, Jonah Kaplan rejoins us now. He's with CBS Minnesota. He's in North Sioux City, South Dakota. So, Jonah, we spoke a little earlier this morning. You've been speaking to some of the residents on the ground, and in some cases, people who have lost everything. What are they telling you?
Everything. And Vlad, you know, the questions that they're asking, what do we do from here? What's the first step? Who's going to help us? You know, they can't think about finishing the task. That's too overwhelming, but they know they can't avoid it. So you take it one step at a time. And the first step is, how do we get back into our homes and salvage the irreplaceable items? Maybe like a wedding album, maybe like a marriage license, maybe there's some old letters you saved from your grandparents, your jewelry. And right now, fire marshals are going house by house here on this road. And I want you to see behind me because it's kind of remarkable. I don't mean to make light of the situation, but it reminds me of the original Superman when the ground opened up and kind of swallowed Lois Lane. That's this, except, you know, this was no earthquake. This was a flood. And I just got this new information too, talking to the public works director. They measured the speed of the current at 21 to 22 miles an hour. So think of all that water, 18 inches of rain, falling sometimes at a clip of 1 inch every 15 minutes. the power of it. Now take a look on this side, Vlad, because this is one of those canyons I was talking about, and we're told from the fire marshal, this is one of 3, and this is the smallest one. It ripped up the sewer lines, the water mains, the gas lines, the cable lines, all snapped. They all have to be put back together. The restoration here is, you're not talking weeks or months. You're going to have to talk years if people are even going to be allowed to build here again.
Jonah, you really bring it home when you talk about, I mean, it's so great that people have escaped with their lives and things can be replaced. But when you mention pictures and diplomas and letters from loved ones, those things can't be replaced. It's absolutely devastating. Thanks so much for your reporting, Jonah. Appreciate you.
Sure.
All right, let's bring back meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the forecast. Grant, it doesn't sound like it's going to get any better in the next couple of days. What can you tell us?
Vlad, and it's not just talking about improvement from a severe weather perspective, but it's also about talking about no improvement from a heat perspective. You have temperatures that you just don't expect in portions of the world that we're not used to dealing with. Looking at, heat and heat indices approaching the triple digits over portions of the southern plains into the Midwestern states and now extending back into the north and east. And then that's on top of areas of the country that are dealing with several days in a row of severe weather. Maybe a day break, but then there's another round of severe weather that could bring not just damage, but that threat for flooding. In fact, we have ongoing severe weather in portions of Oklahoma, Arkansas. That threat for severe weather is then going to advance into the east as storms develop later on this afternoon into this evening. Let's talk about the ongoing severe weather and the storm reports that we've been receiving all night long. Every single one of these boxes here indicate a storm report, be it a downed tree, flash flooding, or maybe just a severe wind report that was picked up from a weather instrument. Severe weather has been something that we've been tracking all morning long. Ongoing severe thunderstorm warnings now in southeastern Oklahoma and then now advancing into Arkansas. This severe weather, even if there's not a warning associated with it, there is very heavy rain associated with some of these storms as they advance to the south and east. Now, there is a severe thunderstorm watch in effect until 11 o'clock Central this morning. That's where we could see primarily straight line winds or just wind damage, but we can't rule out large hail and even the possibility of heavy rainfall resulting in more flooding across portions of the country just to spread that threat for severe weather. Now, this is the area that we're watching this morning. There is an additional area of severe weather farther into the Ohio Valley, north and east through West Virginia, Northern Virginia, and into the Northeast later this afternoon into this evening. This is the forecast model across the South. And then as the storms develop later on this afternoon, that will all advance to the east. Over 65 million people under the threat for severe weather today, Vlad, and that threat continues as we head through the rest of the week. Back to you.
Yeah, in 2 words you don't want to hear, Grant, more flooding along the way, more flooding. Yep. Grant, thank you very much.
You got it.
We got rare access to the U.S.-built aid pier in Gaza amid attempts to deliver much-needed aid to civilians. We're going to take you there next. All right, we are following some breaking news right now. Police in Melbourne, Florida, are reporting an active shooter is now down. Now, we'll remind you folks, at the top of this hour, we broke you the news that police were searching for this active shooter. Now they're reporting that this individual is down. He fired on police officers, but police officers are saying the situation is contained. They've warned people to still avoid the area, although I'm looking right now in real time at tweets from the Melbourne Police Department here, and they have an update just minutes ago that they posted to their Twitter account. It says, while there will still be a few law enforcement remaining presence in the area, there is no further threat to public safety. So again, no further threat to public safety in Melbourne, Florida. We're going to continue to bring you updates because clearly folks are going to want to know who this active shooter was, what his situation, what his condition is right now, what the possible motive was. There's still a lot of unanswered questions. We're going to be digging into that all throughout the day, so you're going to want to stick around for that. Okay, right now in Massachusetts, a jury is deciding the fate of Karen Reed. Let me remind you, she is the woman accused of killing her police officer boyfriend by, according to police, hitting him with her car. Now, she denies any involvement. Penny Commit from CBS Boston has been following this case from the very beginning. So, Penny, what was the scene today in the courtroom? We heard closing arguments yesterday. What did we learn today?
Well, Vlad, both inside and outside of the courtroom, it's been pretty intense. A little altercation this morning between the judge and the attorneys over what's put on the verdict slips. But really, it's going to be probably a long process for the jury to make a decision. Remember, we had 74 witnesses in this case. We've been on this for over 2 months now, and there's a lot of evidence for them to consider. The closing arguments could not have been more different. Of course, the prosecution believes that Karen Reed killed her police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe, by hitting him with her car and leaving him to die in the snow. But the defense says that she's part of a huge, elaborate police cover-up and that actually 2 other police officers are who really killed her boyfriend. So a lot for the jury to consider, and that's caused a lot of commotion outside. I would say there's probably 250 Karen Reed supporters out here. They tell me they're going to wait every single day until a verdict is reached. We have people from Tennessee, Michigan, Connecticut, so all over the country, people have flown in, hopefully for a verdict today, but really could be later in the week when you consider how much evidence there really is for them to go through.
Yeah, it's incredible that people are following this as if it's not real life, but in fact it is. What an incredible case. Penny, thank you very much. You've been covering this from the beginning. We'll stick with you. Thanks. All right, the U.S. military invited reporters to see its floating pier in Gaza. Now, this was designed to be a base of operations to provide aid relief for Palestinians. Our Imtiaz Tayeb was granted access to the pier. Imtiaz, you are there. How are the operations going?
Well, Vlad, the Army is saying it's going better, but let's be honest, it's not going very well at all. This pier has been operational for well over 6 weeks. The goal at the very beginning, at least, was to get over 150 trucks a day into Gaza, which is just a fraction of what used to get in before October 7th. But since this pier has been operational, it's only really been functioning for 16 days in total. And in that 16 days, we've seen around 400 or so trucks. And again, when you think before October, 500 trucks used to get into Gaza every single day, it really isn't much when you consider the expense. This pier cost $230 million. It took around 1,000 U.S. servicemen to make. And so the expense is enormous. But, you know, just observationally, Vlad, you know, we met a lot of servicemen there. They're very committed to helping the people of Gaza, but we haven't been able to get into Gaza since the start of the war. We've, of course, been able to go in very infrequently with the Israeli military on embeds, but that's it. And so to be able to stand even a few hundred feet away from Gaza, where we could see black smoke rising in the sky, where we could see building after building after building in ruins, knowing that there's 2.3 million people in there who so desperately need help, many aid agencies saying experiencing famine. This aid, this support, this pier is so desperately needed. The critics of it say what really needs to happen is Israel to open up its land border and allow that aid in. But
all right, Imtiaz on the ground reporting for us. Imtiaz, thank you very much. Stay safe, my friend. Appreciate it. All right, we've got much more news ahead. We are tracking everything coming in live to our newsroom. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Starting this week, anyone can hail a self-driving taxi if you live in San Francisco, and you can do it with the press of a button. But is that really a good thing, guys? I don't know. Our Kevin Coe took a ride.
10 months after Waymo's soft opening last August, now anyone can ride in one of its robo-taxis across San Francisco. Demand could also be very high. That's because Waymo says about 300,000 people joined a wait list just to have a chance to ride in one of these. But not everyone is so sure just yet.
Wow, that's something.
This is Paul Fuentes' first time seeing a Waymo robotaxi up close.
It's a nice looking vehicle. It even has room for luggage and whatnot.
But this is as close as Paul plans to get.
You wouldn't get in this thing?
No. Regardless of whether they were drunk or able or whatnot, having a human making the choice rather than a machine is a little bit more comforting.
Similar to Uber and Lyft, anyone can call a Waymo through the Waymo One app. Unlock the doors through your phone, hop inside, and start your ride.
I can see why Paul was a little hesitant because, yeah, that is kind of weird for the first time at least. But I do gotta say, so far, mostly smooth.
Riding in a Waymo can include some sudden braking. And during one pickup in the Mission District, my Waymo didn't park at the curb, but instead stopped in the middle of the single-lane street, blocking traffic. This driver had to go into the opposite lane, avoiding incoming traffic, before the Waymo car eventually got the idea and pulled over to the curb.
We're going to have real congestion problems, and at times we're going to have more serious problems. We've already seen accidents and collisions.
State Senator Dave Cortese sees the potential in the technology, but thinks it needs more regulations.
It's a little bit of a wild, wild west situation. I don't think the individual passengers need to be fearful for their lives or anything like that. You're probably experiencing a comfortable drive yourself right now. We're not fear-mongering here. All we're really saying is there's some practical things that need to be in place, and they should be in place.
He's pushing for a bill to put regulatory power for automated vehicles in the hands of local governments.
It's going to keep improving and keep changing, and actually very rapidly, maybe even more rapidly than the pace at which we legislate. The local governments are in a really good position to deal with rapid change because they meet and they adopt laws and policies every Tuesday or every Wednesday.
Cortese pulled his bill after he says it was dwindled down by amendments, but he plans to reintroduce it in January. Until then, Waymo is up and running across San Francisco, but Paul is holding out.
If it's been tested for a few more years and I was more or less incapacitated and unable to drive, then I might.
San Francisco is now the second city in the country where anyone can ride in a Waymo taxi, joining Phoenix, where Waymo has been open for rides since 2020.
All right, our thanks to Kevin Coe. Waymo, no mo, heck no. Let's bring back Grant Gilmore for Grant. I mean, dude, I won't even ride on a tandem bicycle if I'm not in the driver's seat. I don't want anybody driving me anywhere.
Vlad, I'm right there with you, man, because it's like, unless we're going like 5 miles per hour and nobody else is on the road, then I'll sit this one out for a little bit longer.
Not a driverless car for me. Not a driverless car for me. All right, let's check back in with you real quick on the national forecast. What do you got?
Maybe the most important thing is if this driverless car had air conditioning, because that's the big story, is the heat across the area. The southern plains into the southern states, and then that heat extends across the deep south into the northeast as well. But the flooding concern continues across the upper Midwest. Meanwhile, ongoing severe weather across the mid-Midwest, mid-Mississippi Valley. Let me show you the severe risk across the nation today. 3 areas that we're keeping a close eye on. This is the ongoing severe weather across eastern Oklahoma and Arkansas. That threat is also up in the northeast. I mentioned heat, excessive heat warnings for southern Oklahoma into northern Texas. Vlad, it feels like temperatures again today could be approaching 115 degrees. Take it easy out there.
Don't like the sign of that. Grant, my friend, thank you very much. Appreciate you.
You got it.
All right, thanks for joining us, folks. We're going to have all the headlines throughout the course of our midday show at noon, and CBS News 24/7 is back at 1 p.m. Eastern and 10 a.m. Pacific. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.